Well, joining me now is Laurie, a flight attendant for 10 years, who's now co-host of the syndicated show Jet Set, and here with me on set in New York, psychiatrist Dr. Gail Saltz, who hosts the podcast The Power of T. Good to have both of you with us. So, Bobby, I want to get a sense from you first, because this is your office, essentially, where the animals are coming into. There's always the question of what if you sit next to somebody who has an allergy, or what if there are a certain number of animals on the plane? How do you handle a therapy pet?
Well, believe it or not, if you sit next to someone who has an emotional support animal or a therapy pet and you happen to have the allergy to the animal, you are the one that we have to reaccommodate. You are the person that we try to change your seat, or if you can't be on the same airplane with the animal, then we try to reaccommodate you on a different flight.
It's understandable that people turn to pets in situations like this. Has it ever been an issue for you on a flight?
Oh, yes. I mean, there's a turkey. I have seen the turkey in the airport. It's infamous. It even has its own Facebook page. I mean, that actually feeds into part of the problem, that this just becomes a scam for some folks. I've had, some people be allergic. It's different when you are allowed to have the emotional support animal on your lap, as opposed to it being in the kennel down on the floor. Some people get weary of animals in general, whether or not they're afraid of dogs, and now you have it right there in front of them, and many people ask to be reseated. I've actually had someone get off the plane and take another flight.
Wow. So, Gail, when we look at this, there's the issue of people gaming the system, which is why they're looking at this, to define those rules a little bit better, so that people who legitimately can benefit from having an animal with them continue to do so. What are some of the benefits here?
Well, people who have anxiety disorders or mood disorders actually do often find comfort from both the tactile ability to have the animal. So you have this sort of loving, adoring thing. You pet it, you stroke it, it feels comforting. You have a relationship with the animal that feels comforting. But I want to be clear that while it can be helpful, a sort of an extra thing, let's say, mostly for anxiety disorders, mood disorders, various kinds of mental health issues, it's not the primary treatment. And there should be other treatments if someone does need it. So the idea that you must at all costs only be dependent on having your animal with you, even if it makes the environment around you untenable, I think that's really questionable.
There's also the issue of how we know, what kind of training, if any. I mean, we know they need shots, but other than that, if you bring a service dog, obviously the service dog has been trained.
Yes.
They wear usually a harness of some sort that says, please don't pet me, I'm a service dog.
Correct.
I'm working. One of our colleagues knows someone who, I want to show you this picture. This is the actual card that she was able to buy. She said she got it on Amazon for 15 bucks, and it says, yes, my dog is an emotional support dog.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Why is it a problem?
Because, everybody is tempted by breaking their own moral code. And when you tell people that they can save money or they can fake something to have what they want, there are a lot of people that are simply going to go with that. But the reality is that therapy animals really do have very specific training. Animals who are trained to, for instance, go into a hospital when somebody needs comfort, or come into a hospital when their owner needs them, have been trained and are reliable in a certain kind of way. You have to remember, animals are instinctual, and they can lash out, they can bite people, especially when they're spooked or they're in an uncomfortable environment. So therapy animal is very different. And let me also say, doctor's notes are not all created equal. It is really unfortunate that there are mechanisms to get a, quote, doctor's note, which really doesn't mean that you need a therapy dog. So we have to have systems in place where you really go to somebody who can be reliable and trustworthy and work out with that individual patient whether they actually need this and what other things they could have in addition that would help them, for instance, make travel or other place, mindfulness, medication, psychotherapy, that could also help them.
Bobby, when you look at this, what would be your most important piece of advice to this committee that's now trying to figure out how to rein this in and how to put together some regulations here?
Well, there needs to be some leeway given to the airport employees as well, because really the first line starts at the ticket counter, where someone approaches with an animal and they say it's a service animal, which maybe does have that harness on, but if they can't supply the documentation, because service animals are trained on behavior and everything, as you were just talking about, on the airplane. They know not to interact with the other passengers. They know that they're just supposed to lay there, whereas emotional support animals don't go through that training. training. So if you can't provide the documentation for the service animal, now some people just come in and say, oh, well, now it's an emotional support animal. Then, just like as you said, they go on Amazon and they get the card. The only question you're allowed to ask as an airport employee is, can you please tell me which professional service your animal has been trained to provide?
That's it.
That's it. That's the only thing you're allowed to ask, because then you start impeding on their rights, especially if they do have a disability. So there needs to be some leeway or some checks and balances, or a national registry of some sort that actually issues the accreditation. So this way it's standard across the board.
All right, we'll see what the Transportation Department comes up with, and we will keep an eye on this one. Bobby, Laurie, Dr. Gail Saltz, good to have both of you with us. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks,
Thank
Erica.
you.